thank you all for joining us today. This is the second in our webinar series. So this is Fractional Teams alongside Comms Council UK. So we'd like to thank CC UK for facilitating the webinar, and also thank all the members for taking part and attending. As I mentioned before, the webinar is being recorded, and we will be sharing slides and the recording after the event. So this is the second in our webinar series, and we'll be talking today about communities. Communities is a subject that has come up a lot of times in meetings we have with our clients, and we thought actually be quite useful just to dispel some of the myths, give a little bit of background information about what communities are, what they mean, and who they're for. So just in terms of fractional teams, well, I'll introduce myself, Tim, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Fractional Teams. And I've been in the industry now for about 20 years, been previously in a range of roles from engineering right the way through to sales, marketing, and exec jobs. Joining me today is Daria, who's joined our team quite recently, based in Ukraine. And Daria's main role is around community management, so helping us build our own community, but also helping our clients build communities of their own. So lots to cover. I'll just crack straight in and get started. So on the agenda today, we want to talk about quite a few things. We're going to talk about what actually a community is and why people build them. We're going to get into some myth busting. You know, a lot of people talk about communities and aren't quite sure what they mean, so we'll get into that a little bit more. How you can build a successful strategy and find an audience for your community. The different roles that are involved, again, and also how launching an online community can help you with things that you might not have thought about, for example, like search engine optimization. So I'd like to just start off, though, talking about two things that we know about marketing and also to an extent about sales. And this is just before we dive into the main community section. This is something we talked about in the previous webinar, so I won't spend a lot of time. But what I wanted to say is in the B2B space, buyers don't make decisions lightly. OK, so what we usually find is buyers in B2B tend to buy from experts or by being referred by experts. So they have to trust in the expertise of the company they're buying from. Now, snap emotional decisions do occasionally happen, but it's more common with consumer products. So in B2B sales, there's much more research going on in the background. So we believe that, you know, by building a reputation and demonstrating quality, experience, and success, we're able to reassure prospects that we can be trusted to deliver value. And that's an important point around trust. Because again, in our previous webinar, we talked about how buyers often need to see 3 or even 4 pieces of content before making a purchase. Now, that could be lots of different types of content: social posts, case studies, articles, reviews. All of these help build a trust in expertise and also demonstrate honesty. Now, I'm not going to run through all of these bullet points because you can see them on screen, and we covered it in more detail in our previous webinar. But, you know, in the spirit of honesty, I'll be honest with you. And on this webinar, we do want to deliver value to the audience, to all of you, and tell you about communities and give you some hopefully useful information. But it would be really wonderful if actually one day when you actually maybe needed some help, you might give us a call and say, well, actually, you guys know what you're talking about. Can you help us? So, you know, it just gives you a little bit of an idea about how communities can be effective. So the question I would really ask is, what if you could demonstrate your value, so your value as a business, and build a group of advocates who can help you retain customers and also find new ones? Well, That's where community is a little bit different from some of the more traditional social media and social proof ways of demonstrating expertise and building trust. So this is really a bit of a start of some of the misconceptions. So a lot of people think that community might replace your traditional brand marketing activity, or vice versa. Perhaps if you're doing a lot of brand marketing, you don't need to build a community. Well, actually, neither is true. In fact, community and traditional brand marketing can help to facilitate each other. What community does, though, is it really allows you to have a more authentic and hopefully more productive outcome for your business and for your customers, rather than what is often quite a one-directional brand promotion technique used on social media and email and on websites. But before we talk about community building itself, it's important to understand why communities are run, because after all, a community should actually be productive for your business. And when I talk about productivity, I mean in its true sense. So the output or the outcomes of the community, which might in the end be revenue, should be greater than the inputs, which are your costs of setting up a platform, plus the time and the effort involved. So without further ado, we'd like to get into actually talking about some of the approaches you have in terms of building community, and we'll kick off with the next section from Daria about the long-term approach.
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everyone. My name is Daria, and I've joined Fractional teams at the end of the last year, and I'm very glad to be speaking with you today about communities. So let's continue with why community-based marketing strategy is always long-term approach. Imagine that at the given moment, someone somewhere is talking about your brand, product, or services. But isn't it better to be part of this conversation? Creating a dedicated place where you can raise your brand awareness, show your expertise, and communicate with your audience may result in a special kind of loyalty that is hard to obtain by any other means, like traditional advertising or promotion. When you create constant and meaningful interactions with your audience, you can win their trust and open the door to incredible brand transformations. So, why do we build communities? Many brands might feel skeptical about building community for several reasons. Some of them might think that it's time consuming, or maybe they're just not ready to manage another platform. But let me explain how you can take an advantage of building community and develop your successful strategy. We will start with the first category, products. Building community around products can help you to improve your sales, generate your leads, or increase revenue. But the most important benefit of having online community around a product is the ability to retain customers. At some point, you may notice that your customers are losing interest in your products, or maybe they're just getting distracted by your competitors. So this is the great way to gather feedback and real-time suggestions for improvements. We will move to the next category, services. Building community around services can benefit you in many ways, but it can actually be a great way to show your knowledge or expertise, or it can be perfect way to create a higher level of customer support, as your members won't need to look for solutions on your website. They can just come to your community and get all answers to their questions. And the last category is events. Sometimes all this planning, logistics, and promotion might involve a lot of time. So building community around events can have a lot of benefits, such as it's cost effective, as you don't need to think of a place where you will organize and run your event. It also allows you to save a lot of time on planning and setup. And the other benefit is the ability to combine both online and offline events. So this will help you your audience to stay engaged in between the physical events you organize and also keep meaningful connections. And now we're going to move to the most interesting part, myth busting. So we're going to walk through some of the popular myth or misunderstandings people talk with regard to online communities. And I'm going to give you a bit of context around each. So the first popular myth is that communities are often built only around discussions, and you need to be an extrovert to participate. But in fact, to build a successful community, you need to gather all kinds of people. For example, your passive members can have a really huge impact on how your community develop and grow, as they might share different resources, content, and links with other people that might become your potential members. The next popular myth is that online communities and member portals or social profiles are completely the same thing. But in fact, what makes it different is the sense of mutual care and belonging. Joining a community requires a special kind of commitment that is often missing on member portals or social profiles. And the last popular myth is that that is often related to e-learning platforms, actually, that community members only exist to be sold to. And of course, you might have different levels of memberships in your community where people can access some exclusive content. But community is not about selling. It's all about creating connections, building relationship, and build trust. So now I'm going to pass back to Tim, and we're going to talk more about key roles in community. Thank you. See you in a couple of slides.
Great, thanks, Daria. So yeah, so some of the key roles in the community, it's worth just covering this very briefly, because we have to understand that community is all about multilateral communication, and that's between people who contribute, active members, visitors, sometimes we call people lurkers, people who are involved in the communities, and of course the management and the moderators of the community as well. It does require people from your business, but perhaps not as many as you might think. And actually, as a community gets up and running, interestingly, you start to get to a point where perhaps you even need less resourcing involved, but I'll come on to that a little bit later on. So some of the key roles that are important actually come from within your business, and you need to be ready to actually provide that support. Now, people often talk about having a community manager or a moderator. Now, depending on the size of the community you're building and how quickly it grows, that might not actually be a full-time role, but it might be a dedicated part of someone's role. It often fits very nicely actually with someone who looks after areas like social media, for example. But just to get into a little bit more about the members and the advocates, because this is really the key part of the community, we have to ask ourselves the question, what's in it for people running a community and those taking part? So this is the key point. It's a little bit of what I would call a give and take relationship. So it would be great, of course, if everyone was virtuous and shared their expertise for free and expected nothing in return. But the best way to look at a community is that kind of two-way transaction. So you give something to your members, and in return, they give something back. Now, what you give could be different things. It could be, for example, expert advice and content. It could be promotions and offers. And in return, you might find that all you expect from your community members is to give their data, basically a name, an email, a phone number, maybe an address. so that you can actually talk to them about lots of different things that you do as a business. Or it might be that you expect your members to attract other members, to grow your community. So again, not a financial transaction, but more of a transaction in terms of expecting something in return that helps grow your community. But then also you do have the financial aspect, and you could be expecting people to contribute revenue directly to your community. And by that, I mean, for example, if you have a paid membership tier or a paid course, someone could buy that directly from your community platform. Or alternatively, it may be that you expect sales of your product or your service or an event from people who are members of your community. So it's important to understand that it's not always about revenue, at least instant revenue or direct revenue. Sometimes it's about indirect revenue. Or perhaps your goal is actually retention, which is, well, basically retention is just simply asking people to keep paying for something by continuing to demonstrate value and offering that expertise and help. So it is a little bit like asking people to pay for something, but retention is a really important point, as Daria mentioned, especially around product-based communities. So just to get on to the point about what communities actually are and what is a community platform. Well, where are communities? Communities can exist in lots of different places. So, for example, for a brief fleeting moment in time on this webinar, we are a community. Comms Council UK is a community, and Comms Council meets up every so often at various different events, brings together different people. Some people attend all the events, some people attend some. New people come in all the time, so it is a growing and an active community. But you also have communities on social media platforms. So, for example, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, Reddit, and across Discord, and even some of the more closed, exclusive networking groups that you might find, for example, in Telegram or in WhatsApp. You often find, in fact, some very high-profile political communities where you find all of these kind of high-profile politicians having private conversations in a private WhatsApp group. That is in itself a little bit of a community. Although, depending on your politics, whether it's a very productive one is a different matter. But you also have dedicated community platforms as well. So there are platforms out there that have been built to build something a little bit like your own social network or community. So different platforms from the likes of Tribe, Mighty Networks, Circle, all these different platforms are designed to either run independently or integrated fully with your existing corporate website. In a situation where it's very clearly attributed to your brand, you may want to have similar branding as you had on your corporate website. In some situations, it's more appropriate to have very different branding. So you actually have a completely different brand for your community than you do for your products. It really depends on the scenario involved. And then, of course, you have communities that are offline. So, for example, people get together around events. And those events in themselves are communities. But by joining an offline or physical event with online communities, you can really improve performance. So, those physical events can be combined to get maximum impact and also retain your attendee audience. So if you can keep people engaged between one event and the next, you spend much less time trying to attract an audience for every single event that you run. And just on the point about social media, there are quite a few differences between a social media community and a standalone or dedicated community. Social media is often thought to be quite one-sided. I know most social media posts are elicit a response in terms of comments and likes, but they are generally someone going out there and either giving an opinion or promoting some product or service. in communication, which is more multi-directional, sometimes it can get a little bit toxic. Just look at some of the posts and comments on posts that Elon Musk puts out on Twitter. You can have a look at some of the vitriol that's out there. It's a little bit more like a broadcast channel. So yes, there is engagement back, but it's not really true, meaningful engagement. People don't feel like they belong that much. And social media itself doesn't really have a direct contribution to SEO, at least not a significant one. However, in a dedicated community, you do have a sense of belonging and shared interests. You also have a little bit more control over moderation, so you can't, or you can reduce some of that toxicity. And it acts more like an engagement channel where you can listen to people as much as talk to them. It can have a direct contribution to SEO as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And as you can see from some of the statistics there on the left, there is a huge growth in the community platform software market. Now, in and of itself, that's not hugely relevant, but it does give us an indicator that lots of organizations are now investing in building communities. For many of the reasons that Daria talked about earlier around products and services and events. So I'll just leave you with a question to think about here, which is, if you look at the statistics on the left, what might happen if one of your competitors builds a community and you don't? Does that pose a risk to you? Or perhaps you believe it doesn't, but it's a question you definitely want to ask yourself and think, could someone else be building a community, and could that potentially, risk retention of my customers? So I'm going to pass back to Daria now to talk a little bit about community marketing strategies.
Thank you, Tim. So let's get to the next point, community marketing strategy. Like we have discussed earlier, unlike traditional advertising or promotions, community is more focused on connecting, engaging to build that kind of long-term relationships. So the first step in building a successful community is the great purpose. We highlighted 3 key points that will help you to build your successful strategy. And the first key point is to find your ideal member. An ideal member is someone who establishes clear direction for your community. The second key point is to highlight your strengths. Think about, why would people want to join your community? What are your strong sides, and what knowledge can you share? The third key point is to identify your goals and needs. Obviously, you might have some business goals that might resonate with the purpose of building a online community, but it's also important to think about your customers' needs. This will help you to have a clear understanding what message you're trying to get across. And we're going to take a closer look at how to find your ideal member. The most important thing here is to define your community value proposition. This is basically the value your community offers its members. It allows you to find who is your ideal member and how to approach them. Then try to explore your contacts. You might already have a lot of connections on your LinkedIn, Facebook, or even your mail contacts. Try to think about 10-15 people that might resonate with the message you are trying to send and craft conversations with them. This can be interviews or informal conversations. You may even invite a person for a cup of coffee. And when you already have all this valuable information and data, analyze the common phrases and key trends that will help you to create community member personae. And we're going to talk about this just in a few seconds. So why are community personae so essential? As you communicate and talk to real people, you can actually realize what their goals and needs. So this is the perfect tool to test and verify the strategy you have already built. At this point, you might realize that everything you were thinking about is not working and you will need to start over again. But this is the very important step in your strategy. We've also included a short short checklist of how to craft conversations and how to create community personae. So the first step is to divide your ideas into categories. Think about what topics you want to talk about. What if you want to involve discussions in your community or not, or maybe you want to focus on courses, then prepare a list of people that might fit into each category. And to make it easier, try to write down a script of your conversation on interview and highlight the questions you want to ask. If you want to find out more information how to create persona profile, don't hesitate to visit our website, fractionalteams.com. We have a very interesting blog post about creating persona profile. Thank you. And now we're going to talk about power of user-generated content, and I pass back to Tim. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Daria. So we've just got a couple more slides left. Just wanted to talk about UGC, user-generated content. So I like to think of UGC as a little bit like compound interest in a financial sense. It's that magical thing that accumulates more and more wealth the longer you leave it running, or the longer you leave your money in the account. Well, it's the same thing with content in communities. If your community is engaging for users and for your broader audience, they will start to contribute themselves. Now, this usually helps to promote your brands, products, and value proposition, unless, of course, all your customers are unhappy and complaining, which is hopefully not the case. But one of the great things about user-generated content is that it can also help reduce your operating overheads as well, because members can start to even support each other. You often see communities like in Microsoft and Cisco where you have MVPs, these kind of most valuable players, and lots of different versions of that acronym, by the way. But there's these MVPs in the community which actually go in and offer guides and help to other customers. Now, yes, there might be a little bit of self-promotion involved in there because they probably have a vested interest somewhere. But actually, by bringing those people into your community, you can actually reduce the overheads on your support team. So it's really useful. You start to build a self-helping, collaborative community of customers and users, which can be really, really, really powerful. The SEO impact itself is also very significant when it comes to user-generated content. So an important point to start is some communities are gated and hidden. That means search engines don't always get a chance to crawl and search through the content behind. So when it comes to optimizing your website for search engines, the search engines do have to reach the community site. However, if the communities do have a public side or an indexed side, the combination of your own content, the content that you produce and submit to the community, plus your memberships content, that user-generated content, can have that compound effect that I just mentioned a minute ago. So it really helps you to do things like, drive the visibility of content, increase your search engine results page performance, get your ranking higher on Google for particular keywords. Those keywords, if they come up often for you, they're likely to come up often in content that your members, that users create. Also, making sure that you're driving organic traffic to your website. We often say to a lot of our clients that actually ads are great, but ads have got a very short-term effect. You run an ad, you get some leads. Once the ad stops running, generally the leads stop coming. With SEO, you get a much longer-term effect. It takes a lot longer to build up, but once the SEO impact is there and it's starting to have an effect, it has what we call an incredibly long tail. You have content on your website that's going to deliver leads for months or even years to come. And then also, if you get users submitting content, they're going to link to your website, and backlinking is another thing that's really important. And we'll cover this in future webinars as well. But making sure that you have good high authority websites, reputable websites out there that are linking to the content on your website and in your community potentially. So again, all of these things really help to boost your SEO performance. And then just finally, everyone's favorite subject, and I know it isn't the most exciting topic, but it is important to make your community successful, and that's key performance indicators. So KPIs really help you to find out what works and what doesn't. So what it really allows you to do is to maximize your efforts on the things that turn visitors into members, first of all, the things that make members engage with your content and with each other, and then those things that convert members into customers, either direct customers paying money for a membership tier in your community, or for example, members who go on to buy a product that's associated with the community, perhaps from the company that runs the community. So to do this, you need to think about what you want to track. And there's just a few examples here we've given, total members and sign-up rates, engagement with content. Are people liking and commenting on content? How are people behaving after viewing content? Are they viewing other pieces of content or carrying out other actions? What does the behavior look like? And then, probably one of the most important is paid conversions. So are they actually converting to buy a product or to contribute after reviewing the content? So again, looking at all of this data allows you to maximize your focus on what is working and reduce your effort on what isn't, basically. So that's everything. We've gone through quite a lot in about half an hour, and I didn't want to overload you with too much. So please do check out the recording to review what we've talked about. We'll be putting that on YouTube. We'll also share an extended version of the presentation deck. So it's got a little bit more text in it than we wanted to put onto the live presentation. So we'll share that. Also, as Daria said earlier, do check out the blog at fractionalteams.com. You'll find lots of useful articles, templates, guides, other information to help you with all of your different product and marketing activities. It's all there. It's all free. We might ask for your email address so we can send the content to you, but we give you, full control as to whether you opt in or opt out of any further messages. So, please do get in touch if you'd like to learn a little bit more. And if you found this or any of the previous webinars useful, but you need some help to plan or implement new strategies, or even just a bit of assistance with some of the tasks that you're running within the team that are maybe putting on a bit too much strain, especially seasonal tasks, please let us know. That's why our business exists. Fractional teams are there when you need us.